Hello, everyone. So, I guess I'm here. I don't even. Bad Batch time. So, I'm going to be joined shortly by Shayla Brown, who will be, coming on to talk about the Bad Batch. Probably shouldn't have started super early, but still. Whenever she does come on, we will begin. We will kind of talk about this. I'm going to forewarn you. I might be a little bit controversial today because it's feeling like that kind of day. So I'm going to change the color because the Bad Batch. So I'm going to make this red. Red. There we go. Yeah, Bad Batch talk episode. The first 3 episodes. I watched them. Somebody told me something I watched. I don't really love what they've done with Omega, if I'm being honest. But unfortunately, that is the way that it's kind of occurred. I know I'm going live. I really should just record these. But alas, here we are, I guess. But yeah, that's pretty much the entire thing. Oh yeah, like, subscribe, comment. We've got some other videos that you can watch. Lots of those, like hundreds upon hundreds. Lots of podcasts too. Obviously, this is going to be uploaded as well on the podcast feed. But yeah, I don't have anything else to say. I'm just kind of killing time here. I feel like there's other stuff I was going to talk about before. But for the most part, I'm just kind of waiting because my ability to talk about this stuff is amazing, but it's more fun when there's someone else to talk with. Also, I have notes, but I don't think I'm going to use them. But I also kind of going to feel bad if I don't use them, especially if I have a guest who comes who brings notes, So that's kind of where we are right now. I really should be putting in. Oh, you know what? I don't think I can do it on this. Damn. I can just do music. And now it looks less awkward that I'm just talking and saying random things until such the point when I can actually okay, cool. Now we can just chill, listen to music. Unfortunately, I can't use the Bad Batch music because that would be copyrighted. I assume. I don't know. Also, the entire Fantasy Movie League, which you should definitely check out, is kind of Morgan's entire team is falling apart completely, and it's funny for me because he's gonna have to redraft 2 movies now, and we drafted 2-3 weeks ago. So So yeah, once she comes on, we'll talk about the Bad Batch. And until then, I'm just kind of using the time. And then all will be good. I'm just trying to answer a thing here. Yeah, but Bad Batch, interesting show. All this stuff will be cut out when I actually upload it because I don't like uploading the live thing. But yeah, there is probably more to talk about. I'm going to play around with the music now, though, because I don't really want to talk about the Bad Batch yet. But yeah, I now look. I'll tell you, if there's ever a time to truly get someone to hate you, it's when they're a fan of the Bad Batch and you have some things that are not very nice to say about Omega. Speaking of which, I am very, after stalling for way too long, I am very happy to be joined by the biggest Bad Batch fan I know. Shayla Brown, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Now the question is, I don't know if we'll be on speaking terms after this, but you know, we'll find out because I've got
Interesting,
some
interesting.
I've got some controversial things to say about this episode, or these 3 episodes. Sorry. So I, I do want to start off by asking you what what were your overall thoughts? I assume they were very positive, but I'll let you kind of have the floor here.
They were very positive. I think I enjoyed the Omega and Crosshair centered episodes a bit more um than I did episode 2. But I did love all 3 arcs. I think they were fun, and they were a bit of a slower start, and like I think it was expected and would have done a disservice to the story if it wasn't a bit of a darker and more serious tone. Um, but it was a bit to get used to because we usually start off the season with a fun mission, and we're starting off this one, and everyone is literally depressed. But that obviously makes sense because of where we're coming from last season.
So now this is where we got to get a little. So we're gonna go episode by episode, and we'll kind of talk about each of the episodes. And so we're gonna start with episode 1. Now I do have to ask you a question about this episode because I'll
Okay.
tell you this episode annoyed me a little bit, and the reason it did, it feels like Omega as a character through 3 seasons hasn't grown at all, and she's still this very naive, or at least to me, it feels like she's still this very naive and very kind of hopeful kid, which when you think about what's happened over the course of the 3 seasons, it feels like there should be some development in the character.
I think I think that for Omega, one of the things that will never change about her is her belief in the innate goodness of people. But I don't think that's to her detriment, and I think she can also differentiate and recognize when people are an active threat. But I think the beauty of her character is being able to remain optimistic even in these horrible times. And we see that she is also still struggling with that on her own. We don't see it when she's really interacting with other people, but the little things like having her doll being taken away will set her off. And that is a testament to her still being a child, but also trying to maturely handle herself and her thoughts. So I do disagree on that, which is
So
okay.
I guess the thing is, it's like in the first episode especially, there's a lot of moments where you're like, they're almost kind of either making her seem dumber than she is, right, in terms of kind of her role in all this and what's kind of going on around her with Nala Se and with the secret project they're working on, or they're just letting her kind of be passive and kind of letting things happen around her. And like I understand her loyalty obviously to Crosshair, which is admirable and is something which I don't think should change about her character. I feel like the fact that it feels like she is still that character from the first season where she is this kind of like very hyper optimistic, almost unrealistically optimistic character when all of this very bad stuff is going on around her is a little bit weird to me.
But could it also be a coping mechanism? Crosshair and Omega are foils to each other, and we see that his way of coping is by shutting out everything and everyone and being pessimistic about everything around him. And her coping strategy seems to be the opposite, where everything is shit around you, and you've lost your brother and you've been separated from the rest of them. if she doesn't remain optimistic, then she will just simply not be able to function anymore. So maybe this is the only way that she knows how to keep going, because if she lets that facade fall, then it's just going to be to her own detriment. That's how kind of I interpret it.
Wow, that was sorry. That just I didn't even. That actually makes a lot of sense and would explain a lot of my issues with her character. Um,
It's the actor brain. I just have to get inside the head of people.
okay, so then I'll ask you one more question. If you you know if that theory of a coping mechanism is one which I actually really like, then what was her desire? And I think I know what you're going to say, but I want to know what you're going to say. What was the kind of rationale? And I know we're kind of skipping ahead, but her very like her very incessant desire to kind of have, I don't remember her name, but the older version of her basically, or her sister, whatever, um, kind of join them in
Um, I
escaping.
think I think it comes with her hope and her belief that she sees goodness in everyone, and I think Emery is a very interesting and conflicted character, and one that we don't know much about. But I, as the viewer, am getting a sense of deep conflict with her in her, even if it's not too visible. So I wonder if Omega, in her ability to sense people, which I'm not saying is her being force sensitive, or if it's just Omega, being able to be a really good sense of people and their character, is sensing that conflict within her as well.
Well, I think she is force sensitive. I think that's kind of what we got with the third episode, which we'll get to in a little bit. But was there anything that stood out to you in terms of, again, you talked about the tone kind of early, like at the beginning, about with these three episodes and specifically this first one? Was there anything that caught you kind of off guard with kind of how almost depressing it felt opening up?
Oh my god, this is like supposed to be like a show that's geared towards kids, and I can't imagine how kids would be having fun watching this, because it's like we are going into full on moral and ethics classes with these clones being experimented on, and all of these secret projects, and everyone literally on all sides of the board is just like, so yeah, we're sad about one thing and we're depressed about another thing and we're all just sad. And like obviously things have to get worse before they get better, but like I can't imagine for like the younger audience that comes into this being like, "Mommy, this isn't the fun mission that we did last season. It's very different." Which I, as a more mature viewer, can appreciate that. But I just wonder how the kiddies are feeling about it, because it's very different.
Well, and I think that's one of the things Clone Wars obviously did really well, right? Is it did mix in those very depressing kind of storylines, but with a lot of those fun ones. Even Rebels, right? Obviously, with how Rebels ended with Kanan dying, like there's a level of very depressing like subtext and even just scenes in Rebels and Clone Wars.
Yeah, and I think that's something that they've definitely like learned how to perfect over the years, and how to balance out the light and the dark, which makes it great because you want things that are multifaceted, and you want to be able to go through and experience a range of emotions. So yeah, I feel like that's something that Star Wars has always been known for, and they've only just gotten better at it.
So I didn't think there was much. I don't know if there's anything else for the first episode specifically you wanted to talk about. I didn't like. I feel like of the three, this was probably the least content heavy in my mind. I don't know if you had anything else that you kind of wanted to talk about
Um,
with the first episode.
and no, I would agree that it's a slow start. But it's setting up a lot of things. Um, but yeah, I think we can move on.
Okay, so before we move on, actually, what I normally do when I talk about shows and movies, even, is I kind of like to give out like an MVP ish kind of award for each episode. Now, because there's three, we'll do three, and then we'll do one kind of for the first three.
Mhm.
So, if you had to choose an MVP for this first episode, who would it be?
I think this is weird, but it's Dr. Hemlock because he's so creepy.
Oh
Like
my! So you know what's funny? That's exactly who I was gonna say.
every time he was on screen, I just like I felt my skin crawling, and like the way he like at the end of that episode, he does this like little like laugh that made me so uncomfortable, and like I had to like sit there and go like audibly go, that was disgusting. I feel violated, and that means that you've done a great job, Jimmy Simpson, because ugh, every time he's on screen, which is great because that's I think how you're supposed to feel.
Well, and so that actually it's funny because that was exactly what I was gonna say is that like it's almost very Thrawn like when Thrawn first shows up in Rebels, and it's just such a fun like kind of character to have as a villain because they are so devious and they're also like these kind of very adaptable characters, which means they're not going to be like they seem kind of almost weak, but there's no way that they're going to be easy to kill just because of like how many steps ahead of everybody else they are.
Yeah, they're very different from normal villains. Their whole like thing is that like they're not yelling and violent all the time. They're very, in fact, like I'd say him and Thrawn are both very even tempered most of the time, soft spoken, easily underestimatable men who are really like ruthless on the inside, and will strike and are always planning and are always like smart and calculating and several steps ahead of everyone around them, and they know how to manipulate everyone else to their advantage. And I think that makes a much more interesting villain than having one that's just like, yeah, let's kill people, you know.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. Now, going on to the second episode, this was the first time we got the return, or we got the return of Hunter and Wrecker in this, um, in a very interesting. So I want to talk about the planet first, the planet that they kind of show up on first, uh, with what I believe is a new species that we're kind of getting. I'm going to tell you, I want more of that. Whatever that was at the beginning, I want more of that. What was your thoughts on that kind of opening scene?
With the slime,
Yeah.
the vines. Oh, um, those were giving me the vibes of like they're not the same, but like the clickers in The Last of Us, and like I don't know, they were making similar sounds, and I was very intrigued, and also in the backstory that in the context that we got from those vines is like the Empire tried to create this as a weapon and as an experiment, but when it like when the thing kind of went tits up and it went beyond their control, like they were no longer able to control it, so they just bombarded the whole lab and left it there, and they just left this experiment of crazy vine monsters there to thrive. Um, I would love to know the like the full on backstory on that and like how everything went wrong, and that was really interesting. That is, it's not like, oh yeah, these are just native to the planet. It's like, no, this is something that the Empire created and then lost control of and decided to leave it, which is really interesting. And like, I wonder how often that has happened before and how we're just seeing this now.
So I don't know if you remember in the Clone Wars, but there was a they and I don't remember what and I was trying to find the name of the creatures, but there was a creature that they created basically, which was like they're these massive creatures which are very destructive. And I remember that that was kind of the precursor kind of in my mind to all of this stuff with the Empire, I guess now experimenting with, you know, mutations and what we kind of learn in the third episode is probably force-based mutations of living things in order to try to create a weapon, like a biological weapon, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think that might be the Zillo Beast in the clone.
Zillibees, yes, thank you.
Yeah, I remember that.
So I feel like those again. I feel like those are all kind of like interconnected in terms of their way to kind of, you know, lead into this kind of weird ethical question of like biological testing of kind of living things. And what did you kind of make, I guess, make of that whole thing? And I know it's kind of more in the third episode, but in terms of that whole like kind of, you know, I guess how they've gone about introducing these things, like these different weapons.
Um, I think it's just left me really curious about it because we keep hearing these like vague things being tossed around, but we don't know the full extent of what they're doing, especially when Palpatine was there. We never find out really what like specifically he's there to do. Like, is it just like a is he just surveying the facility? I'm assuming it's something more than that. But like I want to know what's going on, and I'm sure we'll get answers, but like what is Project Necromancer? I want to know
I
what
have
that
a theory.
you have a theory. I would like to know it.
Yeah, when we get to the third episode, we'll start. Give you my theory, and you can. I'm interested in what you have to, because I think you'll like the theory.
Because
But
I know it was mentioned in The Mandalorian, but I don't think we got any specifics. So I'm just
I
curious.
don't believe we did. Yeah. Now at the very beginning of the episode, we see Hunter and we see Wrecker kind of come in as bounty hunters, almost, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they have they capture the Pike or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's just me, but like I want to see those two just like I want to like there's like a gap in time, and I want to see kind of what they were doing, because that feels like an episode that was missed
Mm-hmm.
in this trio of episodes, and I
Mm-hmm.
would have loved to see that, because I was kind of like I want more of that stuff, because that, like, again, I want to see what they were up to, what they beat up to with Rex and all those others.
Mm-hmm. I think we are going to get more of that and them like having to make these like do these cool things that they never would have done before, especially because I do know that they are going to eventually like make some kind of deal with Fennec Shand, and have to work with her and do something for her as well. I believe that's what it is, but I think we're gonna see more of them having to grapple with like doing these things that like maybe are morally questionable, and that they wouldn't do, but they are so desperate that they will do it.
So the other part of this, obviously, there are three more characters who were introduced in this episode, who were the clone kids, right?
Hmm.
And they were kind of abandoned, left on this planet by the Empire when they left, and they were kind of fending for themselves, and they kind of appreciate the loyalty that that these troopers have for for each other, right?
Hmm.
And we kind of see. I'm just gonna assume this isn't the last we're gonna see of them.
Yeah.
But what was your early impression? Because there was a lot of conversation between the three of them about whether or not they would leave the whether they just take the ship and leave, whether they'd help them. Like, there's a lot of these questions. There was a lot of, again, moral kind of ethical questioning. What did you kind of think of the way they kind of their decision process, I guess, went?
I really understand each trooper's different perspective in like just wanting to survive, and how each of them felt about it and had different moral standpoints on it. Um, I think I think what really resonated with me, um, was that I I was watching the episode and I was like, please, for the love of God, do not steal our ship. We have been through this before and I cannot do it again. Do not steal a ship. And I was like, immediately I was like, they're gonna get there and they're gonna see Lula in the Omega's bedroom and they're gonna not do it. And I was completely on the nose 100%. And I was like, yes, please don't steal the ship. Please help. And then they said they would get you somewhere safe. So I was glad that they did. And I was just for the most part, I was like, "Oh god, they have to sacrifice all of their explosives on this one monster." Like the whole case. And I was like, "That's a lot of money. Like how are you going to get those back?"
Although the one thing about Star Wars, and especially when it comes to like these things, Rebels obviously as well, explosives are never an issue. They really just there's an unlimited supply of them for the most part, unless unless there's a plot point where they need to not be there.
Yeah.
Using all your explosives versus using none of them, basically the same result when it comes to like future planning. So that's the good thing about Star Wars, because I agree with you. If we're more realistic, that would probably be one of the questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what, again, kind of looking big picture at this episode, do you think that this episode, like, I think this episode sneakily is going to play more of a role in a lot of the way that things are going to happen going forward, than people think. I think those three kids are going to be very important going forward.
Hmm.
I think it speaks to the mentality of the Empire,
Hmm.
right? And kind of also the dissatisfaction potentially within the ranks of the people in the Empire,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Do you think we're going to see those kids sooner rather than later? I think we'll see them eventually, but do you think we'll see them kind of sooner rather than later, or do you think they might come in toward the end?
I think they might come in towards the end. But what I've personally found really interesting about this episode was the reintroduction of Hunter and Wrecker and where they are mentally, because Hunter is usually this stalwart, cautious leader, and Wrecker is usually the one who just wants to charge in and blow things up. And here we see that Hunter is so desperate to find Omega that he has become impulsive to the point of recklessness, and Wrecker is the one who has to be there to hold him back and be the reasonable one and say, wait a minute, the last time we did this things went wrong. He has to be the sensible one, which I found was really interesting, and a really like just an interesting dichotomy of like the roles being flipped, because this would usually be the opposite. And I'm always here for more character development for Wrecker, because I don't think enough people take him seriously as a character, and I think there's a lot more to look at, and this just proves that for me.
Well, I think kind of again to add on to that, when you look at like the way I like looking at character development is you look at the very first time that a character appears, right? Even if it's within the same movie, obviously, then you look at the beginning of the movie versus the end of the movie. But in this case, we actually have they first appeared in the Clone Wars, right? So we can look at what they were like in that show, and there's the one scene in that arc in the Clone Wars where Wrecker basically just runs into like a bunch of battle droids and starts ripping them apart,
Mm-hmm.
and Hunter's just trying to tell him to stop. And I think, I'm not gonna like. I started laughing when Wrecker tells Hunter, "Yeah, we should really wait for backup or whatever because remember what happened last time." And Hunter's like, "I don't have time or whatever," right? Like I started laughing just because of how much those, like you said, how much those roles have changed. Also, I kind of feel like we missed a little bit of character there because I feel like there is an episode missing where we got to see the evolution of Hunter and Wrecker to where they are now mentally.
Yeah, I can totally understand that, and also I'd love to see what was the conversation like with Echo, and when did Echo go, okay, I have to go back to Rex to find out the bigger picture of the situation, because he's just gone right now, which typical Echo, but like how'd that conversation go?
Yeah, it'll be. I feel like, and again, I feel like there's gonna be flashbacks kind of going forward because there is like and I think especially when Omega and Crosshair inevitably meet up with Hunter and Wrecker, I think we're gonna kind of get to see we'll get flashbacks to kind of what happened before. So I assume that's coming. I hope it's coming because I will be very disappointed if this season ends without getting any answers there.
Mhm.
But it is again, it was a very fun way to introduce them. So I'm happy they did that. Do you have anything else for this episode?
No, I think it really just goes to show how desperate they both are and how their characters have irrevocably changed. Just seeing their reintroduction in this episode is how serious and stoic Wrecker has become, and how silent and sad Hunter has become, which is really sad. But things have to get worse before they get better.
So who would your MVP of this episode be?
Hmm. Do you have one?
I do. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
So and this is a little bit unconventional. The Vine monster is going to be my MVP for one reason, because this monster basically did, and actually all the monsters really in that episode, because what they did is they gave multiple scenarios where they had to prove loyalty to each other, right? And because of that, I feel like again, there like every time there was someone falling or someone being pulled or someone being attacked, right? It was always the Bad Batch would come in, like Hunter would come in, or Wrecker would come in, or one of the kids would come in and save each other, right? And so it showed a lot of loyalty, and every time they had to constantly trust each other, and including obviously the end with the explosives in the ship and all that stuff. So I think that would probably be my MVP, with the collective monsters.
That totally makes sense because it totally forces these people to work together and trust each other on a level that like I was like, "Oh god, one of them, especially one of the kids is going down," and it's like for any other people would so just be so easy to leave them, as awful as it sounds, but it's like, "Oh, well, they're going down, I guess." But like no, Hunter and Wrecker are always like putting other people before them, and they're you know obviously gonna help these kids. I mean, they're kids, and we all know Hunter's dad gene just activates when he sees a child. But
Same with
yeah,
Wrecker.
yeah, with Wrecker
Wrecker's
too.
fun Uncle Gene.
Yeah, they all have their dad genes that just go. They see a distressed child and they're like, oh, mine now, adopted. Which is my favorite thing. But yeah, I think I would agree with the vines being the star of the show. That was really cool.
Now, the other thing I actually wanted to mention was it was interesting because the one thing I love is when you have shows with these characters who are very established, right? And they kind of meet these characters who'll be fighting, like when in this episode, right, where they come in, they see these kids who've been fighting these vines, right? And the way the kids are kind of fighting vines is they're kind of just avoiding them, right? They're kind of just saying, you got to avoid these. And then you see Hunter and Wrecker come in, and they just destroy, like the vines start attacking them, and what do? They just cut it, and they just kind of they kind of show, this is how we do it. We're more experienced. I love when they kind of come in and they show, like, these kind of characters who are more experienced come in and show that, because it really does kind of give them like a level of like, look how far they've come, where they're the mentor kind of to everybody else. They're the gold standard.
Especially to these cadets who like were trained to be soldiers but like obviously lost that training halfway through and don't have any mentors at this point and have had to rely on themselves the best they knew how, and now come in these soldiers who are a highly experienced group of clones, who are defective and used to working with orders and not following them and having to be creative with solutions. And I think those are like the greatest mentors to have, is people who can just be like, here's a different way we could do this, and here is how we would solve this, and it might be different than yours, but it's always good to try different things and be creative with solutions.
So going on to the final episode, I think honestly the most exciting episode of the three, we get a whole bunch of stuff, including Omega's escape. We get the return, or the introduction, I guess the return of Palpatine, because he's been in the show before.
Mhm.
And we also get a little bit more of an idea of what's going on. And this is the theory. This is the theory episode, right? This is the episode where they end it with obviously intentionally with this episode, because you get to just theorize like crazy about this. But before we do the theorizing, which we will do, let's talk about what actually happened in the episode. So, what were your overall thoughts with how this episode went? Was there any takeaway or any moment of that episode where you're like, yeah, this is the Bad Batch that I love?
I think it has to be with Crosshair and Omega, when they've gotten to the shuttle and the comms aren't working, and Omega, who has been the hope to Crosshair's relentless pessimism and cynicism this whole episode and like this whole season, and throughout the whole time they've known each other, really, who has been his hope. There's this moment where she is the one who like just begins to tank and lose hope, and she's like, I'm sorry, I thought this would work, and like she's immediately like overwhelmed by the signs herself, and she has put both of them in, and he encourages her by saying, look, you got us this far, and he kind of redirects her attention and like is able to like have his older and more adult soldier skill set step in and take charge, and only like he has let her be independent with her escape mission. Like he's been a follower, and he wasn't taking over, he wasn't leading until she shows the signs that she doesn't know how to handle it anymore, and then he's coming in with suggestions, but he has let her lead, which I thought was cool, to let her be independent. But then when she gets overwhelmed, he kind of softens and encourages her just for a minute, but it's there. And then he asks her, do you know the plan, is it 74 or 72? And she's like, well, Tech had me memorize all the plans. And he's like, of course he did. And I just thought that was a really beautiful moment. It's like, there's the softening that I'm looking for, and I can't wait to continue seeing, is like just how he comes to his own relationship with Omega. I think that's going to be really interesting to see build up, and I think that was the first like glimpse of it like happening.
So I agree with you. And I think the one thing I love to do is kind of, relate things to other things, like relationships like that to other. And I think that moment, which I think truly was kind of you right before that moment where kind of Omega lose hope, you do see, and what I believe is kind of the prime Bad Batch, right? Because that was when, you have Omega going in to rescue Crosshair, and they're fighting and they're kind of improvising an escape, and that's just like what's great about the Bad Batch, right? And that's what kind of the first few seasons was just, was made it so amazing. And then you kind of have this moment where Omega, is have all this excitement, and then she kind of just loses a little bit of hope, like you're saying, right? She kind of gives up. And then what Crosshair does is even though he's kind of been a little bit useless for the most part, and especially with his hand being a little bit, shaky, he kind of comes in and says, look, I'm going to be the adult in the room here. I'm going to kind of help you. He probably didn't want to do it. He probably didn't have to do it, but he chose to, right? And he said, I know that I have to do this. Like, I know I feel responsibility to do this, so I'm going to do this. And he comes and he settles the situation. He kind of gets everything back on track. And I think that was like, because like he could have easily walked away and said, yeah, you're right, or given up or whatever, right? But instead he didn't.
Yeah, he could have easily been like, well, that's your problem. We might as well go out there and stick our hands up and surrender. But he doesn't, and like he's still very pessimistic and cynical about this escape. He doesn't believe that it's going to happen until they probably make the jump, and even then, like how long do they have? But by the time Omega loses hope, he's like, okay, I have to be the one here. And he could have walked away, but he doesn't. And he just like is like, we've made it this far. We're gonna keep going. We're not done.
So yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And I think I want to talk with the Emperor now, because as much fun as that escape was, man, the Emperor came in, and we got to really see the Emperor. We've got to see the Emperor kind of be the Emperor, right? And come in and be intimidating. You got to see the whole formation. And what was your kind of thoughts on that?
As soon as I noticed that there was an overwhelming majority of like stormtroopers and clone commandos like all there, I was like, I know who's coming. I know who's coming, and I'm excited and also fearful. And so seeing him come into the facility, I mean, man, first of all, Ian McDermott's voice acting as Palpatine is amazing and like brilliant, and it was just so exciting to see him there, even though he's so terrifying. And I just want to know like precisely what is he doing here? Like what are they doing behind that ray shielded door? What's going on? And we don't get to see that very much. They're just like teasing us, and I want to know.
So, you know what? Let's talk. Let's do some theories, because I think what's more fun than theories. What do you think Project Necromancer is?
To me, it kind of sounds like bringing people back from the dead or something. Cause like necromancy, I don't know though. Like that's just my roughest guess. And I am fully ready to be wrong because I usually am, especially when it comes to these science things. I have no idea.
So I agree with you. I definitely think that it's bringing someone back from the dead. And I think who they're going to bring back from the dead, as I mean, I don't know if I don't actually know what the canon to this is right now, but is Ventress dead? And could they be bringing her back? Because like I'm thinking like if they play with the idea of her being dead, right, and kind of doing it like that, that would be a very because it's something force related, right? Because
Mhm.
because they talk about the M count in the blood, and I'm just gonna take a wild guess here and assume that's midichlorians
Mhm.
because M count
What
and
else would it be?
taking well, and it's, you're taking it for the blood, like that's like the Phantom Menace, like right from the Phantom Menace. So that's what I'm gonna assume it is. I'm gonna also assume that that Omega is has a high midichlorian count, and that there is a there she is force sensitive.
Mhm.
And so I think my theory is probably that they're bringing somebody back. They're bringing some former Sith person from the dead. I think it's going to be Ventress. I think that's what they're going to do. I think they're going to try to basically make like a clone army of her, because obviously a clone army of Force users is very 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 good for
Yeah,
an empire trying to do some crazy stuff.
they'd be unstoppable.
Absolutely. And
If the clones had force during the Clone Wars, like I think it would have made things a lot easier.
well, and especially, if they're all clones of evil kind of Sith people from the past, right?
Hmm.
So that, and again, I think that's my theory. I don't know what the canon is. I don't know what canon they're going to use because they can kind of pick and choose what they want to do with this. Would you be excited if it was Ventress, or would you kind of want it to be somebody else or like something else?
I think I would be excited to see it be Ventress, but my question is, once you resurrect her, whatever, once you bring her back, who like how do you think that she's gonna cooperate with you? Like I, I don't think like she's too stubborn to like I can't imagine trying to make an army of Ventress because she's so strong-willed and like independent that like I don't think anyone could tell her what to do. You'd have to do a lot of genetic modifying to get her to be pliable, I think.
Well, so the interesting thing is because like we know Mother Talzin and Emperor Palpatine have a relationship, right? A close relationship.
Mhm.
So I feel like because Star Wars, they like connecting everything. I feel like Mother Talzin's going to be connected to this as well in some way. Because again, necromancer, like it feels like bring people back from the dead is literally what she does, like Mother Talzin does with her magic, right?
Mhm.
Honestly, actually, you know what? I'm kind of like reformatting the theory in my brain right now. What if it's Mother Talzin they're bringing back from the dead?
I was kind of thinking about that as you were saying it.
I like that actually more than I like the Ventress thing because, again, like there was always been this kind of like rumors of like the relationship between Talzin and Palpatine,
Mhm.
and Rey exists and Palpatine had to have a child, so I'm just
Mhm.
saying.
Yeah, I get it.
I mean that actually now I kind of like that more than I like the Ventress thing. I want them to bring back Mother Talzin and just say, here we go. Here's the person, and she can just show up in everything because she's alive now. That'd be great. I'm
Yeah.
actually all for that.
Yeah.
Or Darth Maul, basically just someone from that planet.
I feel like with Maul though it would lose its impact because they've done that before.
That's
Twice.
true. Also, Maul's still alive at this point, I guess,
Yeah,
technically,
I guess he is, yeah.
because Rebels happens after.
Yeah. Unless they
Wow.
wanted to clone him.
Or his brother. You never know.
Yeah, you never know. Night Sister
Wow.
Magic.
Well, and so yeah, either way, I definitely think they're going to be cloning. Like I definitely think that project is using the Force blood of a clone to create some Force army thing.
Yeah.
But that means that Omega has the Force, right?
Mhm.
And if she or like a stronger potency of the Force, right? That
Yeah,
that she can
either
use.
either that or her blood is compatible with metachlorians in the way that the others isn't.
Or at least like because they talk about decay of like how they decay, like the sample and tested decays, right?
Mhm.
So maybe actually maybe you're right because maybe they have the like it's kind of like they if they put the midichlorians into you, right? They just don't connect unless you have the right blood, right? So if you have the person with the right blood, you could clone them, and you can then insert force powers basically into them.
Yeah, and it seems like they've been trying with every clone's blood sample on Tantus, and hers is the only one that's been successful. And my theory about that is, if my theory is correct, where it is her blood being compatible with Metachlorians, is that because the rest of them have gone through like advanced aging and like a lot of genetic modifications, whereas we know that her DNA is unmodified pure. Maybe that's why it's easier to put the DNA, put the metachlorians into her. I don't know science, but that's my guess.
So, you know what's interesting? Because the way Nala Se talks about her, right? And we haven't mentioned her, I don't think, at all.
No.
But the way she talks about her, I feel like there's going to be something where she was created basically as this kind of like almost better, like a better genetic version. Like you kind of think about like you got the kind of the you got the upgraded version, right? The platinum version of a clone, and obviously because I think Nala Se wanted a child, right? Because she kind of treats Omega like her child.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that maybe the idea behind it was like she was kind of created as like this like above average kind of clone, right? Or top tier clone, and whatever cloning, again, Star
Mm-hmm.
Wars science is weird, but whatever kind of cloning materials they used for her were different. Or again, alternatively, she's just like a clone of someone who was force sensitive, and that was the reason. I mean, Star Wars, you could kind of do anything with it.
Yeah.
But again, yeah, it was a great episode. I feel like we're missing something, but I don't know what else there is.
I don't know, man, because I got up at 3 a.m. to watch, and then I got 4 hours of sleep. So I am running off of just vibes.
Well, the show gave us lots of vibes. So then with that, who's your MVP for the third episode?
I think it's either Crosshair or Omega. I think I'm gonna choose Omega because once she kind of gets the ball rolling with the escape, she like fully commits to it and doesn't look back, in spite of how many holes her plan has. And like, she's doing what her brothers have trained her to do, which is when all else fails, improvise, and they are very good at doing that and still winning. So she has this hope, and she's seen it work before, where their plan falls apart, they just improvise it, and now she's the one leading that plan, and I just think that's really cool.
So I'm going to say Crosshair's my MVP just because I think it's between the two of them. But also, I got to say the other heartwarming thing was when her dog comes back, right? And he just kind of jumps in, yeah, and comes in and just like that was an awesome moment, because it's like, because you think about all the pessimism, oh, he's dead, whatever. And then it's like, nope, he's not dead. He's fine. He's awesome. And he's back. And that was awesome too.
Yeah, and I also love how Batcher is voiced by D. Bradley Baker, who voices all the clones as well. That man is crazy talented and like can make all these crazy noises. And I just love how Batcher, who is, I'm assuming, going to meet the rest of the batch, is voiced by him as well. I think that's so cool, and I love him. And when Omega in the first episode told him that he had to go, and like she couldn't go with him because she had to get Crosshair first, that was the first time I started crying while watching season 3. So it just proves, if you put a dog in there, I will start crying at some point. Great job, Star Wars.
Even a space dog.
Yeah.
With that being said, thank you so much for coming on. I'm gonna let you go get some sleep. And we'll talk again when we have to talk about the next episode next week.
Yeah, next week. And we'll only have one to do next week, which will be nice.
Yeah, 1 30-minute. They're gonna just put a whole bunch of random stuff in that episode too, just to make sure that we have that we have lots to talk about. So it's gonna be good. It'll be fun.
It'll be fun.
Anyways, I'm gonna let you get some sleep. Thank you for joining me. And
thank you for having me.
We'll talk soon. Bye.
Talk soon. Bye.
So with that being said, thank you all for watching this review. I'll be back next week. Technically, I have other stuff coming up, but anyways, bye.